What's up, guys? I'm going to do something now that I haven't done in years past, which is going to do a little preview video of the NFL playoff. At least this is what I think is going to happen. And I'm starting with the 6 wildcard games this weekend. And I'm doing this for you guys because I am a hero and that's just what I do. I have integrity. So I'm going to go over every game. I'm going to go through the advantages each team has, disadvantages, and who I think is going to come out on top. No offense to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Without further ado, let's start with the first game on Saturday, Cleveland at Houston. I think this is actually very, very interesting because Joe Flacco, since he became the starter and joined Cleveland, has been one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting quarterback to watch. He's been playing balls out, doesn't give a shit, throwing the ball deep into double coverage, and the Browns have been really on fire when he's been in there. But his counterpart, CJ Stroud, just had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and he's playing at home. So who has the advantage? Is it playoff Flacco, which is something we haven't seen since 2014, or is it the new prodigy whiz kid CJ Stroud? It's going to be a toss-up. I will give Stroud and Houston the advantage there. The running games seem to be pretty similar. I would have given Cleveland the edge if they still had Nick Chubb healthy, but they don't. Receivers, I'm going to have to give the edge to Cleveland in terms of Amari Cooper. Njoku has turned it up as well. Nico Collins is good for Houston, but I would say in terms of receivers and tight ends, I give Cleveland the edge. When it comes to the offensive lines, I've got to admit, I'm not some film whiz and I sit down and study every single offensive lineman. So I'm going to lean on PFF because they're the ones who dedicate more time to this. I'm not saying PFF is perfect, but I think for the most part, they do a pretty decent job in terms of the line of scrimmage grading. For them, they had the Cleveland Browns ranked 7th and the Texans ranked 18th. So that seems to be a pretty sizable gap. I therefore will lean to their expertise, fall back on that, and I'll give the offensive line edge to Cleveland. But anyway, now to the defensive side of the ball. Defensively, the Cleveland Browns were one of the best defenses in the league, if not the best. They are second in points allowed per drive, but they were first in yards allowed per drive, plays allowed per drive, meaning they got off the field quickly, and average amount of time of possession. So again, they were getting off field quickly. So their defense is legit, much better than Houston. They get the edge there, whereas Houston was around middle of the pack in both yards and points allowed per drive defensively. Special teams wise, I'm just going to be looking at the kickers. Houston's kicker, Kyerme Fairburn, he missed his first extra point in the last week of the season versus the Colts, but he got bailed out. Before that, he had only missed one extra point and a field goal, so he'd been a very, very good kicker this year. When he's been healthy, he missed 5 games with injuries, but he's going to be the kicker. Dustin Hopkins, Cleveland's normal kicker, is going to miss the game with an injury, so they're going to rely on a backup kicker. Then we go into the punters. Corey Bojorquez was 8th this year in terms of yards per punt, whereas Cameron Johnston, Houston's punter, was about 14th, 15th. However, Cameron Johnston did a better job of pinning teams inside their own 20-yard line than Bojorquez did. So I'm going to give Houston the special teams edge. The final straw here is who has the better coach. And honestly, I feel like coaching is one of those things where, as a fan, it's hard to really choose because we only see the product on game day and we don't see all the little things that go on behind the scenes. But I will have to say Cleveland has the coaching advantage because D'Amico Ryans, this is his first ever playoff game, and this is going to be baptism by fire for him. Whereas Kevin Stefanski, as we've seen, he somehow rejuvenated the career of Joe Flacco, which is something I never thought I would see. This is his second playoff appearance in the last 4 years for the Browns, which is crazy. I think the fact that he got the Browns to the playoffs despite them losing, their starting quarterback and their starting running back and all these injuries, I think gives Cleveland the coaching advantage schematically as well. Overall, my final pick, I believe the Browns are going to win this game. I'm going to say they win 24-21. They sneak out with a win. Miami at Kansas City. Starting off with the quarterbacks, this is one where stats and the eye test tell you a different story. Statistically, Tua Tagovailoa was better than Patrick Mahomes this year, but is he a better quarterback? Absolutely fucking not, especially in the playoffs. Mahomes is arguably, on a throw-by-throw basis, the greatest playoff quarterback we've seen thus far in his career. He's played 14 playoff games. Although this year was the worst year of his career, he doesn't have a lot of receiving options or weapons, but he is the better quarterback. I think even Dolphins fans would admit that the Chiefs have the quarterback advantage here, especially at home in freezing weather, which is what it's supposedly supposed to be like. But that's really where it ends for Kansas City for a little bit. Miami has the advantages in terms of both running back. I like Isaiah Pacheco, but Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, Miami's stacked at running back spot. So Miami has the edge there. Receivers, this used to be one of Kansas City's strengths, but as we all know, Miami, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, those two guys are both better than any receiver the Chiefs have. have. And that includes Travis Kelce, by the way. And I'm not going to make a Taylor Swift joke, but Travis Kelce is still the best receiving option the Chiefs have. Rashee Rice might be the only other guy thus far who has shown any sort of promise, but the Chiefs receiving group has literally cost them multiple games this year. So this is an easy win for Miami. However, again, it's going to be very, very cold. So Miami's biggest advantages like this in terms of their receivers might be negated. In terms of the offensive lines, again, leaning back on PFF, the Chiefs have the 14th ranked offensive line, whereas Miami has the 23rd ranked offensive line. So neither of these units are particularly a strength for either team, but Kansas City is considered to have the superior offensive line by the people who studied it. So I guess I'm going to say this is about a slight edge to Kansas City, but it's basically a push. Now we get to the defensive side of the ball, and this used to be one of the weaknesses of the Chiefs for so many years. This is the first time in Mahomes' 6 years as a starting quarterback in the NFL that he's had a top 10 defense. The Chiefs, they finished 3rd in points allowed per drive and 6th in yards allowed per drive. That's a Super Bowl caliber defense, and again, the weather is going to be a big factor. Whereas Miami, 16th in points allowed per drive, 11th in yards allowed per drive. Miami's mediocre defense. They gave up 56 points a couple weeks ago. Kansas City has the edge defensively. In terms of the special teams, Harrison Butker, he's been in these big moments before. He's won a couple Super Bowls, made some big kicks, made the game-winning Super Bowl kick last year after that bullshit penalty. He's made plenty of other big clutch kicks in the playoffs, so he gets the edge there. In terms of punting, Tommy Townsend from Kansas City has more yards per punt, although neither, particularly him or Miami's Jake Bailey, were great in terms of distance. Bailey actually had one of the lowest yards per punt in the league, 29th out of 33, but he was middle of the pack and did have a better percentage of pinning teams inside their own 20 than Tommy Townsend did. But overall, I would say it's pretty much negligible, and if it came down to it though, I would trust Harrison Butker over Miami's kickers, so I would give Kansas City the edge on special teams. Coaching, Mike McDaniel is an offensive wizard, but he still hasn't won a playoff game. Andy Reid, one of the greatest coaches of all time, even though this hasn't been his best season, I would still think that you got to give the edge coaching-wise to Andy Reid in this matchup. I think the Chiefs are going to win. I think they're going to win 31-14. Pittsburgh at Buffalo, transitioning to the Sunday games now, and goddamn, Pittsburgh is just so fucking boring. I'm sorry, I had to say it every time, but Pittsburgh finds a way to fuck up every game they play in and make it boring as shit. But anyway, I digress. Looking at the positional battles, quarterback obviously goes to the Bills. Josh Allen is one of the better quarterbacks in the league, whereas Mason Rudolph is going to always be most known for being killed by Myles Garrett. Although Rudolph, to his credit, has played very, very well in the last couple weeks, which is why he's starting instead of Kenny Kittenmittens. But yeah, Buffalo has the major edge at quarterback. I would say the running backs are about a push. Najee Harris, I've criticized him a lot. I still don't think he was worth a first-round pick all those years ago, but he's had the best stretch of his career entering the playoffs. He's become an average, maybe slightly above average running back. Nothing special, but he's not even the best back on his own team. Jalen Warren is also a very good back. I look at Buffalo, James Cook, Latavius Murray. I would give the Steelers a slight edge here, but it's not really enough, in my opinion, to make any sort of difference. Receivers, obviously in Buffalo, we got Stephon Diggs, we got Dalton Kincaid, we got Gabe Davis, they got Dawson Knox. Pittsburgh has George Pickens, and what else? Really nothing. Deontay Johnson has shown some flashes, but he's really just a guy. So this is a major edge at the receiver position to the Bills. Looking at the offensive line, this is basically a toss-up. PFF had Buffalo as the 16th ranked offensive line, and the Steelers were ranked 19th. Defensively, the Steelers were 8th in points allowed per drive, but 19th in yards allowed per drive. That kind of shows that they might be a little bit of field position merchants, but also TJ Watt's not going to play in this game, so that's a big blow to their defense, but their defense is a big reason why they consistently win, 9 or 10 games every year, despite their offense being boring as shit. Buffalo is 7th in points allowed per drive and 10th in yards allowed per drive. They also forced the highest percentage of turnovers in the league, so I will give Buffalo's defense the edge, especially now that TJ Watt isn't playing. Special teams, Chris Boswell, been steady, been reliable, was excellent in terms of both field goals and extra points this year, whereas the Bills, Tyler Bass had some rough patches there. I'd give the kicking edge to the Steelers. The punting edge, when I say kicking, I'm talking about field goal kickers. The punting edge, though, goes to Buffalo, although both Sam Martin, Buffalo's punter, and Presley Harvin had the second worst average yards per punt in the league, whereas Martin was also in the bottom 6, but Martin was top 4 in terms of punts down inside the opponent's 20, and Harvin was 14th, so both of these guys did a really excellent job when given the opportunity of making it longer fields for their opponents. So I would say special teams is a toss-up. toss-up. We get to coaching. Now, this one's interesting because Sean McDermott, it feels like both of these coaches going into this game are really maybe not coaching for their jobs because Tomlin, the Steelers don't fire anybody, but it feels like McDermott, is on the hot seat. They had the Al-Qaeda story come out, and then ever since then, the Bills had a bunch of great coordination, and they ripped off a bunch of wins. They won 5 in a row, I think, to finish 11-6. But it feels like if the Bills lose this game, then McDermott will be fired. But I don't know what to make of Tomlin. I do think there is something to be said for never having a losing season. And how many years he's been there? Like 17. But at the same time, he's won how many playoff games in the last 13 years? 3? He's won 3 playoff games in the last 13 years. Has a losing career playoff record. He's either, I've said this before about him, he's either the greatest bad coach of all time or he's the worst good coach of all time. I don't know which one. I can't decide. But based on what's going on right now, I guess I would give the coaching advantage to the Bills just because they're on a hot streak. I don't know. Coaching to me is basically a toss-up. In the end, I think the Bills will win this game because of the massive gap in the quarterback positions and the receiver position. There might be a blizzard there. We don't know what the weather's going to look like. I think the Bills are going to win this pretty comfortably. I say they win it 27-17. We finally get to the NFC battles. Green Bay at Dallas, which is a sneaky, very good rivalry over the last 15 years or so. Personally, I'm rooting for Green Bay. Shocker. Going at quarterback, you got the unproven Jordan Love and Dak Prescott, neither of which have ever made a conference championship game. I think based on this season, though, even though Jordan Love had a very good debut season, I think Dak Prescott has to get the advantage here just because he's done pretty well in the wild card round in his career. It's been the divisional round that he's had his boo-boos, but I will give Dak Prescott the edge. He's playing at home. He should play better than Jordan Love. We get to the running backs. Tony Pollard had a disappointing season for Dallas, but still had over 1,000 yards. Rico Dowdle is okay. There's no real special running back that they have in Dallas, but in Green Bay, Aaron Jones, to me, is the best running back individually in this game, but he does have health issues. A.J. Dillon isn't that great. I think this is pretty much a push. It's pretty much a toss-up at the running back position. At the receiving position, Green Bay is notoriously, they have a lot of young guys, not a lot of big names. Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavion Wicks, all guys that have shown glimpses of talent, but there's no one superstar in the group like there is with Dallas and CeeDee Lamb. No Green Bay player had even 800 receiving yards this year. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is one of the best receivers in the league. Jake Ferguson's a good tight end. Brandon Cooks is very steady. So I would give the Cowboys the edge at the receiver position. When looking at the offensive lines, both of these offensive lines graded out pretty well. According to PFF, Dallas had the 6th highest ranked offensive line, and Green Bay had the 8th highest ranked offensive line. So that tells me that it's a push. That tells me that both of these quarterbacks should have plenty of time to throw. Again, ideally they should, but we never know what happens on a given Sunday, right? Moving to the defensive side of the ball, the Cowboys finished 10th in points allowed per drive and 9th in yards allowed per drive. So a good, not great defense, although we all know Micah Parsons, just don't look up his locker room habits at Penn State, is a superstar and he always needs to be accounted for. But they were noticeably better than the Packers defense this year, which finished 22nd in points allowed per drive and 26th in yards allowed per drive. So I expect the Cowboys to rack up a bunch of yards and points at home like they've been doing all season. I also expect Jordan Love to play well because he's been on a bit of a heater, but at the same time, well, I won't spoil the surprise yet. Getting into special teams, in terms of the kickers, field goals, Dallas has the edge there. Their guy, Brandon Aubrey, literally didn't miss a field goal until the last week of the season, whereas Anders Carlson from Green Bay had some inconsistencies. He missed 5 extra points. He missed 6 field goals. Not a great year for Anders Carlson. In terms of punting, Cowboys also have an elite punter. Brian Anger, who was drafted ahead of Russell Wilson, was once a joke, but now it's like, hey, great pick. Led the league in net yards per attempt, whereas Daniel Whelan from the Packers was pretty low in that category. Anger made the Pro Bowl, if it's for what it's worth. If you give a shit about that for punters, who cares? Anger is also 13th in touchbacks inside the 20 percentage, and Whelan was in the bottom part. So again, the Cowboys have the special teams advantage. Coaching advantage, you have Mike McCarthy going against his old team and Matt LaFleur. I would say that LaFleur might actually be a better coach than McCarthy, but I don't think it matters. I think because the Cowboys, they're at home, and I just think the Cowboys are much more talented than the Packers are. And so I would say the coaching matchup, I'll give McCarthy his props here. This is going to be a big game for LaFleur. His first playoff game without Aaron Rodgers. See how he does. LaFleur's results without Aaron Rodgers in his career thus far have been mediocre. It's a smaller sample size, but been mediocre. We're still waiting to see. McCarthy at least has shown now, last couple years in Dallas, that he can win without Aaron Rodgers, although he hasn't still made a conference championship game with Dallas. And this is going to be his 4th year. I'll give McCarthy a slight edge in coaching, but it's not, to me, that's not the deal breaker. The deal breaker is the difference in talent. I think that the Cowboys offense is just going to have a field day versus the Packers defense. They're at home. I think the Cowboys probably going to put up close to 40 points. I think the Cowboys win this 35-24. Rams at Detroit. We finally get to the Matthew Stafford revenge game, or is it a revenge game? Because Stafford literally asked to be traded from Detroit. Anyway, he finally has the chance after being drafted first overall in 2009. All these years later, 16 years later, Matthew Stafford finally has an opportunity to help the Detroit Lions win a playoff game. You love stories like this, folks. Anyways, getting to the quarterback battle, the Rams, you got obviously Stafford, and then you got Jared Goff, who's, hey, it's a Jared Goff revenge game too. Wow, isn't this amazing? The scriptwriters did a great job. I think overall, statistically, I would say that both Stafford and Goff are really on the same level, but I'll say this, Stafford has been not that bad in the playoffs. When he has made the playoffs, that is, his playoff sample size, we all know he won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So I would give the edge at quarterback to the Rams, even though Jared Goff statistically was the better quarterback and has really turned his career around the last couple years after looking almost dead in the water his first year in Detroit. So, but I do think everything else equal, I do think Stafford is a better quarterback, and especially in the postseason thus far, so he's going to get the edge there for me. Running backs, David Montgomery. I know Lions fans wanted to see more Jahmyr Gibbs, who looks like a stud. Both David Montgomery and Gibbs had double-digit touchdown this season. Montgomery averaged 4.6 yards per carry, Gibbs at 5.2. Craig Reynolds wasn't bad either, so the Lions have a devastating run game. They led the league in touchdowns. Rushing, I mean, it's pretty easy. I don't even really have to go into the Rams at all in terms of their run game. They don't have anybody spectacular. And Kyron Williams made the Pro Bowl, respectable back, but the Lions have the edge here. Receivers. Detroit obviously has Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sam Laporta looks like a stud. Both of them had double-digit touchdowns this year. Josh Reynolds isn't terrible either, whereas we look at the Rams side and you have Puka Nacua and then Cooper Kupp. Tyler Higbee is a Stafford favorite. I wonder why. This is actually a close one. Nacua is a lot like St. Brown, and Cooper Kupp is always one to be feared when he's healthy and on the field, although he's not anywhere near his 2021 status. I would say that this is basically a push. It's a toss-up at the receiver position. I think they both have at least multiple receivers and receiving options that could really hurt you. Going at the offensive lines, the Detroit Lions had the 4th highest graded offensive line in the league, which isn't a surprise considering some of the names they have, and the Rams were a respectable 10th. So neither of these offensive lines are that bad, although I will say you have to give the edge here to the Lions. Again, I'm just kind of deferring to PFF. Looking at the defense, the Lions were 26th in points allowed per drive and 20th in yards allowed per drive, so not very good there. The Rams weren't that great either, 19th in points allowed per drive and 21st in yards allowed per drive, so it's basically a toss-up, although the Rams do have Aaron Donald, always is a threat, no matter how old he is. He's not the force he was a couple years ago, but he's still one of the better interior defenders. The Lions obviously have Aiden Hutchinson, counter that, but neither of these defenses are particularly special or anything to write home about. I would say that's a toss-up as well. Kicking, the Rams had one of the worst punters, Ethan Evans, in terms of net yards per punt and in terms of downing opponents inside 20 percentage, whereas Detroit, Jack Fox was top 5 in downing opponents inside the 20-yard line percentage, and he was much higher rated in terms of net yard per punt. So the punting advantage goes to the Lions. I know I was supposed to do kicking advantage first, but I went the other way. The Lions booted their old kicker, Riley Patterson, to the curb, and now Michael Badgley is under control, so he's okay. He has missed 2 extra points, though, in 4 games, although he's been perfect on his field goals. But still, neither of that is compared to the struggles the Rams have had this year. They've had 2 kickers, Brett Maher and Lucas Harvisak, whatever, and they both missed a ton of extra points. They both were 75% or worse on field goals. So the advantage on special teams, to me, easily goes to the Lions. Coaching matchup, Sean McVay versus Dan Campbell. Really 2 different guys. Sean McVay is the X's and O's genius. Dan Campbell is kind of the motivator, get the best out of your guys. But X's and O's, nobody really associates Dan Campbell with X's and O's. But the results that have happened and the turnaround that have happened in Detroit since he got in charge cannot be denied. Although you could say the same thing about McVay. I think McVay has to get the edge here because he's a Super Bowl champion coach. He's been to 2 Super Bowls, although Dan Campbell has shown that he's not just some stupid meathead. Who wins? This is actually one of the tougher choices to make. I think the Rams go in and they pull up looking for a W and they leave with a W, but it's going to be close. I think the Rams win 28-24. And then finally we get to my special game, my Eagles at Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. The Eagles are the most oppressed and hated against team I've ever seen, specifically this year's edition. The quarterback spot, we got Jalen Hurts versus Baker Mayfield. Mayfield had a bounce bounce back year, and I thank him for having a good year because it helped further my Tom Brady's assistant quarterback narrative. The Bucs finished with a better record this year than they did last year with Tom Brady quarterback. However, and I know people hate Jalen Hurts, and I know he has a fucked up finger, but I still think the Eagles have the quarterback advantage. I still, call me bullish, whatever, I'm not ready to give up on Jalen Hurts. Now, if Hurts puts up a stinker here in this game and the Eagles lose, then I'll be like, okay, you know what, maybe I was wrong about Jalen Hurts, but I feel like he's gonna do a good job. I trust Jalen Hurts more, and a large reason for that is because I've seen him perform well on the biggest stage in the sport in the Super Bowl last year, so I'm giving him the edge. Philadelphia has the quarterback edge, although Baker is not a scrub like we once thought. Running backs, DeAndre Swift had a very good year. Kenneth Gainwell, yeah, he's not that great. Running backs, I mean, Jalen Hurts is a big part of the running game. Jalen Hurts had 15 rushing touchdowns, which got a lot of attention, and people were crying about how he got them. But Tampa Bay, once again, one of the worst rushing teams, the worst rushing team in the league in terms of yards gained and yards per attempt. So the Eagles, although not as good rushing the ball as they were a year ago, do get the edge in the run game. Receivers, a lot of big names in this one. You got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin for Tampa Bay. Both of them are still 1,000-yard receivers. Rashad White's also a good receiving back out of the backfield. Cade Otton is a decent tight end, but you look at Philadelphia, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and who knows, maybe 34-year-old Julio Jones will show something. I doubt it, but who cares? I will say that the Eagles have the edge at receiver, although it is close. I think that Devonta Smith is the better second option at this point. Although, again, A.J. Brown did get hurt in the final week of the season, but if he's on the field playing, there's really no excuses for that. So I think Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown is a slightly better combination than Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at this point, and I think Dallas Goedert is better than Cade Otton, so I will give the Eagles the edge at receiver. Offensive lines, the Eagles, according to PFF, had the best offensive line in the league. There's really no, I don't know. So yeah, the Eagles get the edge on the offensive line. Just for shits and giggles, the Buccaneers were 11th, which isn't terrible either, although as the stats show, in terms of running the ball, they aren't very good as run blockers. Defensively, now this is why the Eagles haven't been as good this year as many thought they would be, even though they still finished 11-6. The Eagles, for all the talent they have defensively, all the big names defensively, 30th in points allowed per drive and 31st in yards allowed per drive. They give up a lot of points, they give up a lot of yards, they don't get off the field a lot, they don't really force a lot of turnovers. So for all the big names, and including Jalen Carter, who had a very, very good rookie season, really just a terrible unit. And Tampa's defense isn't anything special either, but Tampa 12th in points allowed per drive, 23rd in yards allowed per drive. Tampa has the better defense, which would surprise a lot of people considering all the big names, but the Eagles defense has been their biggest Achilles heel thus far this season. So Tampa has the edge defensively. Special teams wise, Jake Elliott, he's the man. He's won a Super Bowl, made clutch kicks before, made multiple 60-plus yarders in his career. So the Eagles get the kicking edge. Although Chase McLaughlin this year for the Buccaneers was very, very good. Made all of his extra points, 94% of his field goals, but I'm going to give Elliott the edge just because of his track record. In terms of punting, Braden Mann on the Eagles was top 5 in net yards per punt. Jake Camarda was not that great in that category, although they were both about the same in terms of pinning teams inside their own 20 in terms of percentage-wise, but having a guy who's top 4 in the league in net yards per punt, I say gives the Eagles the punting advantage. Now we get to the coaching advantage, Todd Bowles versus Nick Sirianni. And I gotta say, as an Eagles fan, I'm kind of stunned to hear that there are legitimate chances that Sirianni might be fired, especially since we just made the Super Bowl last year and we were 10-1 at one point this year. I think more of the problem, if you want to say you want to go after Brian Johnson for his shitty play calling, or you talk about Matt Patricia, obviously, I don't know what Nick Sirianni has done to warrant getting fired. I think that'd be pretty significant. But I would say that I think he's still better than Todd Bowles. I just think that the Eagles have the coaching advantage. This is a game that the Eagles should win. The Eagles should win this game, objectively speaking, not even just as an Eagles fan, but they should win this game. If they lose this game, I would be unbelievably disappointed. But I will say this, even if my Eagles do lose, I will still win in some way because it will help further my Tom Brady system quarterback agenda, because I could say the Buccaneers lost Tom Brady and they won a playoff game the year after. But overall, my final prediction, I think the Eagles are going to win 31-14. And that wraps up my wild card weekend preview and predictions. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it ran a little bit long, but you know what? This is my channel. I post what I want and you're watching it. If you did watch it, I hope you enjoyed it. You're probably going to disagree with a lot of what I said, but at least I reasoned it out and explained my thoughts and didn't just throw shit against the wall and saw if it stuck. I did my research because that's what heroes do. Stay safe, stay off the marijuana. If you haven't yet, please subscribe.